Millionaire laughed as Mistress poured wine on his pregnant wife. 3 weeks later, he was on trial. A tall crystal flute tipped precariously in the candlelit glow, sending a stream of rich burgundy wine cascading over a very pregnant woman's pristine white gown. Her husband, an influential millionaire, revered by some and reviled by others, threw his head back and laughed. Onlookers froze, transfixed by the spectacle, a mistress triumphant, a wife humiliated, and a man's cruel delight. Whispers raced around the opulent dining hall. Little did anyone know, this was just the beginning. In 3 short weeks, that very same man, seemingly untouchable, would be on trial. Betrayals, secrets, and shocking revelations would soon unravel, changing everything they thought they knew. The late autumn evening brought a gentle chill to the bustling city of Aspen Falls. Over in the exclusive private lounge of the Bradford, a high-end rooftop restaurant perched atop a sleek skyscraper, music played softly against clinking silverware and hushed conversation. Tables were laid out with pristine linens, the aroma of lemon butter sauce and rosemary roasted lamb floating in the air. The Bradford was known to host only the wealthiest elite, and that evening, its crowning table set on a slightly elevated platform overlooking the city lights belonged to Graham Ashworth, a multi-millionaire known for his flamboyant parties and powerful business acquisitions. Graham was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a charcoal Armani suit. A single stroke of grey dashed across his temples, giving him the confident air of a seasoned businessman who'd seen too many deals go wrong and many more go his way. Next to him was his pregnant wife, Patricia Ashworth, glowing with that maternal radiance that softened her typical, no-nonsense demeanour. She wore a flowing white evening gown, carefully chosen to accommodate her growing baby bump. They appeared, from a distance, an exemplary power couple. But upon closer inspection, tension simmered. Dining with them were their associates, close friends, and certain local dignitaries. At the head of it all, uncomfortably prominent, sat Veronica Hale, a name that had popped up in tabloids lately, whenever photographers caught glimpses of Graham with someone who was definitely not his wife. Veronica was a striking woman in her late 20s, with fiery auburn hair cascading in loose waves around her shoulders and a slender figure accentuated by a body-hugging crimson gown. Everyone at the table knew the nature of her relationship with Graham. There had been murmurs for months, though the couple continued to vehemently deny everything in official statements. The hush that fell when Veronica stood up to make a toast was unnerving. She raised her crystal flute high, swaying slightly as though under the influence of more than just a couple of glasses of wine. Patricia watched with visible discomfort, her hand instinctively resting on her swollen belly. Veronica leaned in. "Here's to us all," she purred, "and to victory in business, in pleasure, and, above all, in love." Her words slithered across the table. Several guests exchanged uneasy glances. Graham watched her with a slight smirk. He didn't interject to defend his wife or to set any boundaries. Silence lingered. Then Veronica, with a languid, deliberate motion, tipped her glass. Deep red wine tumbled forth, splashing onto Patricia's white gown. Patricia gasped, standing quickly, but her reflexes were slower given her pregnancy. She stared down in horror at the dark stain bleeding across the fabric, her face flaring with shock and embarrassment. Instantly, whispers erupted, but nothing was louder than Graham's laughter as he watched his wife stand drenched and shaking. His laugh echoed in that stifling atmosphere, cruel and self-satisfied. The man who always prided himself on refined decorum was now savoring this humiliation as though it was some grand joke, and as if to punctuate the moment, he took Veronica's hand and kissed it with feigned chivalry, ignoring Patricia entirely. Just like that, with one splash of wine, a marriage's betrayal became more than rumor. It became a public display of power, scorn, and heartbreak. That moment would serve as the night's shocking highlight, yet no one suspected that it would be the catalyst for far more drastic consequences. In 3 weeks' time, Graham Ashworth, who had seemingly everything, would find himself on trial. But for what? That was the question that would haunt every guest at the Bradford, from the waitstaff to the highest echelons of Aspen Falls society. News of the incident at the Bradford spread like wildfire. Guests and staff whispered among themselves, embellishing details. Before dawn, social media posts recounted the spectacle. Graham Ashworth's pregnant wife humiliated. Crazy affair goes public in Aspen Falls. Millionaire's mistress spills red wine showdown. Hashtags soared across Twitter and Instagram. Even local newscasters, starved for sensational society news, found themselves discussing the humiliating confrontation on the morning broadcasts. At the center of this swirling chaos was Patricia, who withdrew from public life almost immediately. She cancelled the next day's appointment with her OB-GYN doctor. Emily Carson moved to a family friend's estate on the outskirts of the city and refused to respond to reporters who camped at her gate. Pregnant and emotionally devastated, Patricia tried to shield herself from the relentless scrutiny. Meanwhile, Graham thrived on the controversy, at least outwardly. He made a show of taking Veronica to flashy events. They were photographed at the Aspen Falls polo match, at the gallery opening for a local artist, and at an exclusive party thrown by the real estate magnate Arthur Lee. In each instance, Graham wore his arrogance as an accessory, flaunting his wealth and ignoring the moral condemnation swirling around him. Yet behind that confident facade, Graham's personal empire was showing cracks. Anonymous threats and blackmail letters began arriving at his home, his offices, and even to Veronica's penthouse. Each contained cryptic messages about secrets from his past and no mention of finances. The tone felt personal, laced with vengeance. Graham quietly hired a private security firm to investigate. It was an unspoken detail that he did not share with Veronica, nor with his associates at Ashworth Industries. Then, one chilly evening, an unexpected visitor arrived at Graham's corporate office, Detective Julian Reyes, a man of meticulous precision with a sharp, inquisitive gaze. Though he wore standard professional attire, there was an undercurrent of quiet intensity in his demeanor. He flashed his badge upon entering. "I'd like a moment of your time," he said calmly. Graham frowned. His mind raced with possibilities. Did this have to do with the blackmail letters, the humiliating scandal with Veronica, or had Patricia pressed some sort of legal claim? He tried to read the detective's neutral expression and found little to interpret. "Certainly, Detective," Graham replied, ushering Reyes into a private conference room. Once the door closed, the detective wasted no time. "I'm investigating an unusual complaint," Reyes began. "A sworn statement that you used intimidation tactics, threatening an individual connected to your wife's father, Samuel Bateman." Graham's face betrayed a flicker of confusion, or perhaps it was alarm. Samuel Bateman was Patricia's father, a retired judge who still held enormous sway in legal and political circles. Graham had been on cordial terms with him, at least outwardly. He wondered who might have come forward with a complaint. "I can't imagine what you're talking about," Graham said smoothly. "Is it possible someone is trying to defame me due to the recent coverage in the press?" Reyes shrugged. "Perhaps, but the statement says you threatened Mr. Bateman's associate about revealing damaging personal information. The complaint was lodged anonymously, but the details are very specific." Graham's chest tightened. He schooled his features to remain calm. "I assure you, if anyone is making these claims, they are false." Detective Reyes studied him. "For your sake, I hope so. We'll be in touch." Within 10 minutes, the detective left. Graham sat alone in that conference room, feeling the magnitude of the fiasco creeping up on him. The betrayal at the Bradford was just the tip of the iceberg. Now he faced blackmail, police inquiries, and potential lawsuits. Still, he held on to the thought that he was Graham Ashworth, unstoppable. He had every reason to believe that money, power, and the right alliances could solve all problems. He had no idea what avalanche was about to crash down on him. Patricia sat in a quiet sitting room at her friend Lucinda Morgan's estate. She was grateful for the refuge. Lucinda had been a college classmate of hers, a confidant since they pledged the same sorority at Vanderbilt University. Lucinda's mansion featured expansive gardens and secluded corners where paparazzi dared not venture. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the luxurious cream-colored sofas and the tall library shelves, lined with classic literature. Patricia had just finished confiding in Lucinda, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. "I just don't know what to do, Lucy," she whispered, her hand resting protectively over her pregnancy bump. "I can't go back. I can't just pretend everything is okay. And I'm also petrified that if I stand up to Graham in the media, he'll do something worse." Lucinda pulled her into a comforting embrace. "You shouldn't have to deal with this alone. Let your father help you." Patricia shook her head. "You know how controlling he can be. Once he steps in, everything becomes a public trial, literally and figuratively." She sighed heavily. "I'm already a spectacle. He'll make it into a crusade, and I don't have the strength to handle that right now." Just then the door opened. An older man with a slight stoop and kind eyes stepped in. It was none other than Judge Samuel Bateman himself, who had arrived unannounced. "Patty," he said softly, using her childhood nickname, "I'm sorry for barging in like this, but I heard about what happened. There's no way I can just stand by." Patricia exhaled, defeated. "Dad." He walked over, gently took her hand, and sat beside her. "I know we've had our differences. I always thought Graham was a charming businessman, but deep down I wasn't sure he was right for you. Still, it's done. Now, we need to protect you and my future grandchild." Patricia felt a surge of relief. Maybe she had feared her father's influence all these years. Maybe she'd been worried about his controlling nature. But now, with his presence, she felt safer than she had in weeks. Samuel Bateman turned to Lucinda. "I hope it's all right that I came uninvited. My daughter is in trouble, and I intend to help." Lucinda nodded. "Anything Patricia needs, she knows she can count on me." He turned back to his daughter. "I'm going to meet with my old colleagues, speak with some attorneys I trust. We'll see if there's any legal recourse. Did you know that an anonymous complaint was lodged with the police about Graham threatening one of my former associates?" Patricia shook her head, alarmed. "No, what kind of threat?" "Something about blackmail. We haven't pinned down the details, but it suggests Graham is feeling cornered, possibly something to do with his business dealings. It's time we shed some light on whatever dark corners he's hiding in." Patricia's throat tightened. "Dad, there's something I haven't told anyone." He waited patiently. She swallowed hard. "Graham has. He's been receiving these suspicious deliveries at our house. Large packages, late at night. I questioned him once, and he told me it was none of my concern. Then I heard rumors about suspicious financial transactions overseas." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "I never asked too many questions because I was pregnant, and I told myself I needed to focus on the baby. But I suspect there's something illegal going on." Samuel's expression turned grave. "We're going to find out exactly what that is." His voice carried a certainty that made Patricia realize the unstoppable force that was Judge Samuel Bateman, especially when his family was threatened. She would soon discover that certain lines, once crossed, spiral into unstoppable events that would lead her own husband to a place few would have imagined, the defendant's seat in a high-stakes trial. Across town, Veronica Hale was savoring her new wave of fame. She'd gained thousands of social media followers after the humiliating spectacle at the Bradford, and she was milking the attention. For an aspiring socialite, This was gold. She posted pictures of herself with captions like "living my best life" or "never settle for second place." She rarely mentioned Graham, as though her rise needed no disclaimers. Despite her pride, Veronica was not entirely at peace. She kept glimpsing a silver sedan parked across from her penthouse building at odd hours, its tinted windows giving no hint as to who might be inside. Phone calls with no caller ID, lines going silent when she answered, had become commonplace. She suspected paparazzi or even outraged moralists who despised her involvement with a married man. But the fear gnawed at her that it might be something more sinister. Late one night, as she lounged in her penthouse's open-concept living room, sipping a glass of Malbec, her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID blocked. Against her better judgment, she answered, "I need to see you," a low, urgent male voice said. Veronica's heart hammered. She recognized the voice. It belonged to Raymond Stark, a private investigator Graham occasionally hired for dirty work. They had crossed paths months prior. "What do you want?" Veronica hissed. "Graham's been paying me, but now he's going back on certain deals. Let's just say I have information about him and about you that you wouldn't want the public to know. I need to speak with you in person." Veronica felt bile rising in her throat. "Are you blackmailing me?" Stark's laugh was cold. "Consider it an opportunity. I'm letting you get ahead of the storm. Meet me at the old train yard on the south side tomorrow night at 10. Before she could reply, he hung up. She stared at the phone in horror, mind buzzing. She remembered seeing Stark rummaging through Graham's personal files once, under the pretense of investigating a competitor. He likely had access to secrets that could ruin Graham or land him in prison, or both. Veronica paced. Should she tell Graham? Her rational side warned that if Graham suspected she was in any way compromised, he'd abandon her or worse, turn on her. She decided she would handle it alone, at least for the moment. Her entire life was built on carefully orchestrated moves, from small manipulations to playing men against each other. She just never expected the game to get this dangerous. By morning she was resolved. She'd go to the train yard. She'd find out what Stark had on her and on Graham. She'd weigh her next steps. If the price wasn't too high, perhaps she'd buy his silence. If it was something catastrophic, she might have to consider giving the information to the highest bidder. After all, she had no loyalty to Graham except for what he offered her, and money, as she had come to learn, was fleeting. Reputation was everything. Detective Julian Reyes found himself stuck between an anonymous complaint and swirling allegations. He had a sense that something bigger than marital drama was amiss in Graham Ashworth's world. The blackmail letters, the rumored threats to Judge Bateman's associates, the mysterious hush surrounding certain accounts in Ashworth Industries, pieces of a puzzle, but no direct evidence yet. One afternoon, Reyes decided to pay Patricia Ashworth a visit at Lucinda Morgan's estate. He arrived unannounced, his respectful tone appeasing the hesitant house staff. He was led to the solarium, where Patricia was tending to potted orchids, trying to distract herself from her troubles. She glanced up, startled to see him. "Detective," she said quietly, brushing soil off her hands. "Is something wrong? I'm here to check in, Mrs. Ashworth." He paused, "and to follow up on some leads. May I sit?" Patricia nodded, motioning to a rattan chair near hers. They settled among the sunlit foliage, the sweet scent of flowers mingling with the tension in the air. "Is Graham in trouble?" Patricia asked. Reyes cleared his throat. "I'm not at liberty to say, but I'd like to know if you have any information about his business dealings or personal actions that might be relevant to an ongoing investigation." She hesitated, her eyes misting with residual pain. "I know he's been receiving strange deliveries and might have overseas accounts with questionable activity, but I don't have concrete details, Detective. I stopped asking questions when he started shutting me out after I got pregnant. It seemed easier to avoid conflict. Reyes studied her, taking in her obvious vulnerability. "If you recall anything else that could be a piece of the puzzle, please contact me." He stood to leave, then paused, pulling a business card from his breast pocket. "Keep this with you. If you ever feel unsafe, call me." Patricia took the card, reading the name, Detective Julian Reyes, Aspen Falls, PD. She gave a small, grateful nod. For a moment she almost felt a semblance of security. When Reyes left, Patricia stared at the detective's card. She had that sense, deep in her gut, that events were converging toward a climax. She just didn't know how violent or traumatic it would be. No matter how deeply hurt she was, she never thought she'd see the day her husband faced public legal scrutiny, and certainly not the day she might be asked to testify against him. At precisely 10 o'clock the following night, Veronica Hale slipped out of her chauffeured car at the abandoned train yard on the south side of Aspen Falls. Her stiletto heels clicked ominously against the worn concrete as she walked through a labyrinth of rusted boxcars, vacant tracks and broken glass. A single flickering street lamp cast harsh shadows. Out of the darkness, a figure emerged, Raymond Stark, wearing a hooded jacket. His angular face was partially illuminated by the glow of a cigarette he held between his lips. "You're late," he said, exhaling smoke. Veronica's chin lifted defiantly. "Cut the theatrics. What do you want?" Stark dropped the cigarette, crushed it underfoot. "I was on Graham's payroll to gather information on certain rivals, but I discovered more than I bargained for." Veronica's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Stark pulled out a small flash drive from his jacket pocket, holding it out tantalizingly. It's got files, bank transactions, passports, shipments. Let's just say your precious Graham might be involved in laundering money for some very unsavory people. If that sees the light of day, he's finished." Veronica swallowed hard. She knew Graham was shady, but actual criminal activity on that scale, that could destroy him, possibly send him to prison. Also, by association, it could torpedo her social climbing if anyone thought she was complicit. "Let me guess. You want me to pay you to keep it hidden?" she said, folding her arms. Stark grinned. "Clever girl, but it's not just about money. I need protection from powerful people. Graham's not the only one who stands to lose big if this goes public." Veronica cocked an eyebrow. "And how am I supposed to offer you protection? I know you have connections, people in your circles who can broker deals, hush up the right channels, bury evidence. You make a call or two, we share the spoils, and Graham's secrets stay buried." For a long moment, Veronica considered. She had some high society connections, but they were more into forging social alliances and charity galas, not burying federal crimes. Still, maybe she could manipulate them if the payoff was enough. If she refused, Stark might go to Patricia, or Judge Bateman, or the authorities, or the press. The scandal would blow up. She imagined the headlines, "Socialite mistress tied to money laundering scheme." "All right," she said quietly. "Give me 24 hours. I'll see what I can do." Stark studied her expression. He handed her the flash drive. "I'll expect a call tomorrow, same time." Veronica nodded, slipping the flash drive into her handbag. She walked away, her heart pounding. She had no illusions that Stark had kept the only copy. He likely had backups, an insurance policy. She was stepping into treacherous territory, but if she handled it right, she might come out on top and perhaps claim a bigger piece of Graham's fortune for herself. What she couldn't anticipate was that a silent observer perched behind a dilapidated boxcar had been filming them the entire time. Detective Julian Reyes had been tipped off about this meeting. He had the entire conversation recorded, albeit muffled. Suddenly, the tangled web of Graham Ashworth's personal fiasco was starting to yield tangible leads for a criminal investigation. A powerful man's downfall was not just probable, it was inevitable. 2 days later, Patricia Ashworth was propped up by pillows in a guest room at Lucinda's estate, trying to rest. She'd been experiencing early contractions, false alarms, Dr. Emily Carson said, but still terrifying. Stress was a probable factor. The baby was only 7 months along, and Patricia feared going into premature labor amidst all the chaos. While lying there, she checked her phone. Several missed calls from unknown numbers, voicemails piling up. Finally, she mustered the courage to listen. The first few were from eager reporters. The last message, however, sent a chill through her. A voice disguised by a modulator crackled. "You think you're safe at your friend's mansion. You have no idea what's coming. Stay out of Graham's business, or you'll regret it." Patricia's pulse raced, her free hand cupping her belly. Who would threaten a pregnant woman? She suspected it was one of Graham's associates, or someone who wanted to keep her silent about his potential crimes. She immediately dialed her father. "Patty?" Judge Bateman answered on the first ring. She struggled to keep her voice steady. "Someone's threatening me, Dad. I have no idea what to do. Send me the recording." "I'll have the police examine it," he said firmly. "We're not letting these people intimidate you. I'm going to talk to Detective Reyes." She exhaled, tears of relief. "Okay, thank you. Take care of yourself, honey. And if at any point you feel unsafe, tell Lucinda. Have her bring you to my place. I have security. No one will touch you there." Patricia nodded, ending the call. She wondered if she should run away, maybe even leave Aspen Falls entirely. But then a swirl of guilt and anger enveloped her. Why should she be the one to run? She had done nothing wrong. She'd endured Graham's deception, public humiliation, and now this? It was too much. She pressed her hand gently to her abdomen and whispered to her unborn child, "I'll protect you, no matter what." Back at the corporate headquarters of Ashworth Industries, Graham was in a foul mood. Deals were stalling. Board members were jumpy. Investigations lingered in the background like dark clouds. He had fired 2 employees who raised too many questions about suspicious wire transfers. The blackmail letters kept arriving, though none demanded money, strangely. They were more focused on exposing secrets, destroying reputations. One evening, as Graham worked late, his phone rang. He recognized the number as belonging to the chief financial officer, Bernard Elwell. Bernard's voice trembled with barely concealed panic. "Graham," he said in a hushed tone, "we've been subpoenaed." Graham froze. "Subpoenaed for what?" Bernard inhaled sharply. "The district attorney's office is investigating alleged money laundering tied to some of our overseas accounts. They want all financial records for the last 18 months. Graham's mouth went dry. "Tell them we'll comply. Stall as much as possible. I'll bring in our attorneys." Bernard hesitated. "Graham, the attorneys can only do so much. If they have enough to suspect us of wrongdoing," Graham cut him off. "We'll handle it," he growled. "I won't let them tear us down." But once he hung up, the confidence in his voice vanished into the silent gloom of his office. He slumped in his leather chair, eyes on the city lights beyond the window. Veronica had been distant lately, citing some urgent personal matters, and Patricia had cut off all contact except for the necessary items regarding her pregnancy. Even his usual business allies were acting cagey. The walls felt like they were closing in. He realized this might be bigger than a scandal. He could actually face criminal charges. Anger flared at the blackmailers, at his father-in-law, at Patricia for being so weak, at the whole system. The betrayal at the Bradford was child's play compared to the fiasco looming. He clenched his fists. No, he would not let them ruin him. He'd do whatever it took to secure his fortune and his freedom. Judge Samuel Bateman had never been a man to back down from corruption. Even in retirement, his legacy was that of a fierce jurist who dismantled organized crime rings in the city decades ago. Now, facing the possibility that his own son-in-law was involved in illegal activities, he couldn't resist stepping in. He arranged a meeting with Graham at a neutral location, a private lounge in an upscale hotel. Graham arrived in a dark coat, scanning the place for potential eavesdroppers before taking a seat opposite his father-in-law. The tension was so thick it could have been cut with a knife. "You wanted to see me?" Graham said, voice cold. Judge Bateman looked at him, unflinching. "Patricia is receiving threats. She's carrying your child. I trust you're aware of this?" Graham's eyes flickered with something akin to concern, but quickly hardened. "Threats? From who?" "That's what I intend to find out," Bateman replied calmly. "I'm warning you, if you know anything about these threats, if they stem from your business dealings, you need to put a stop to it." Graham stiffened. "I've never threatened my own wife. If someone's harassing her, it's not me. How dare you imply? I'm implying that your hands are dirty, Graham. Don't pretend I don't know about your dealings. The DA is on your trail, and I have colleagues in that office. I'm aware of the subpoena." Graham's face twisted. "So that's what this is? A father protecting his daughter by threatening me with legal retribution?" Bateman's tone remained measured. "This isn't about intimidation. It's about justice. You humiliated my daughter, betrayed her, and now it appears you might have put her in danger along with your unborn child through your questionable dealings. Mark my words, I won't rest until both she and that child are safe." Graham scoffed. "What are you going to do, old man? Use your retired judge influence to twist the law? You can't make me vanish." Bateman sighed. "I don't need to twist anything. The evidence is piling up on its own." He leaned forward, voice low. "Give Patricia the respect she's owed. Offer her and the baby financial security. Keep her out of your mess. If you fail to protect them," he paused, letting the implication hang in the air, "then I'll use every connection I have, every resource at my disposal, to destroy you." They stared at each other for a long moment, an unspoken battle of wills. Eventually Graham rose, threw some bills on the table to pay for the untouched drinks, and stormed out. Judge Bateman watched him leave, feeling the old adrenaline surge from his courtroom days. He had no illusions that Graham would change overnight, but he was prepared for the war that was coming. That night, Veronica received another call from Raymond Stark. She had spent the last 24 hours discreetly reaching out to certain wealthy acquaintances, trying to gauge if anyone had the means or inclination to orchestrate a hush-up. It was trickier than she'd anticipated. The old money elites in Aspen Falls liked gossip and scandal only when it served their own ends. Helping to bury possible federal crimes was another matter entirely. When she answered Stark's call, he sounded terse. "Any progress?" Veronica gritted her teeth. "I spoke to a few people." This type of cover-up is not a simple transaction. They want to see what they're dealing with. They need proof that it won't backfire. Stark let out an exasperated breath. "I gave you a flash drive. Isn't that proof enough? They want to verify it." Veronica shot back. "They want details who the players are, the scope of the money laundering, how compromised the accounts are. If I go to them with half-baked data, they'll slam the door in my face." Stark paused. "I can provide more, but that means a bigger risk for me, and a bigger payout." Veronica rolled her eyes. "Yes, of course. What else is new?" She inhaled sharply. "Look, if you can give me something that conclusively ties Graham to criminal activity dates, transaction IDs, signed documents, I can spin it in a way that these people will handle it. They might be willing to kill the story if they see an advantage." "Fine," Stark said. "Meet me tomorrow night, same place." She hung up, her nerves frayed. This was becoming more dangerous each passing day. If Graham found out she was meddling, or if the authorities caught wind that she was conspiring to hide evidence, she could be complicit in obstruction of justice. Her entire future was balanced on a razor's edge. Events began moving at a dizzying speed. Court documents leaked. A well-known journalist named Valerie James published an expose in the Aspen Daily Chronicle, hinting at Graham's possible involvement in a sprawling money laundering operation with connections to shady offshore entities. Patricia's name was mentioned only in passing as the unsuspecting wife. Veronica's presence was overshadowed by the broader criminal allegations swirling around Graham. Graham had no choice but to lawyer up. His legal team scrambled to assure him that, without concrete evidence, the DA's case was weak. But each day, new revelations emerged. Detective Reyes quietly continued gathering data from his sources, including the footage he had from the train yard. Though the audio was incomplete, it suggested enough wrongdoing to justify deeper investigations. Meanwhile, Patricia, increasingly concerned for her own safety, moved into her father's heavily guarded estate. She tried to keep her stress levels down for the baby's sake. Part of her wept for the man she once loved, recalling the early days of their relationship. Graham had been ambitious and charismatic, sweeping her off her feet. The cruelty he displayed now, allowing Veronica to publicly shame her, entangling her life in illegal dealings, felt like a horrifying betrayal. The night Veronica was set to meet Raymond Stark again, thunder rumbled in the distance, and dark clouds veiled the moon. She took a different car, wearing a long coat over plain jeans and sneakers, practical attire for once. She wasn't seeking attention tonight. She arrived at the deserted train yard, bracing herself against a cold wind. Stark was nowhere to be seen. She paced, hugging the coat around herself, tension coiling in her stomach. After 10 minutes, she decided to call him. No answer. 20 minutes passed, the wind picked up, and the sky opened into a light drizzle. Still no sign of Stark. Suddenly, a figure appeared. Veronica exhaled in relief, but as the person drew closer, she realized it wasn't Stark. It was Graham. Her breath caught in her throat. He wore a black coat, his face shadowed by the faint lamplight. "Veronica," he said, voice low. "Expecting someone else?" She swallowed, mind racing. If he knew about her arrangement with Stark, she was done for. She tried to compose herself. I got a tip. There might be some paparazzi lurking here, trying to get photos of me. I was checking it out." Graham's mouth curved in a humorless smile. "You must think I'm an idiot. I know you've been meeting Stark behind my back." He stepped forward, looming over her. "He's been feeding you lies about me, hasn't he? Trying to blackmail you with stolen files." Veronica forced a laugh that sounded hollow. "Graham, I wouldn't do anything to betray you, I swear." His hand shot out, grabbing her arm with a painful grip. "I thought I could trust you to stand by me, but you're just like everyone else, opportunistic, shallow. You want to jump ship the second I'm in trouble." She flinched. "Let go of me." "You can't treat me like this." She winced, stepping back. "Besides, you humiliated your wife in front of everyone. Let me pour wine on her. This is who you are. If you wanted loyalty, maybe you should have shown some compassion or decency to begin with." Anger flashed in his eyes. The tension escalated, crackling in the damp night air. Suddenly, headlights cut across the train yard, illuminating them. Another car pulled up. Detective Reyes and 2 uniformed officers jumped out. "Mr. Ashworth, Miss Hale," Reyes called, stepping forward. "Is there a problem here?" Graham immediately released Veronica, stepping back, his face contorting in fury at being caught in such a moment. "No problem, detective," he lied. "Just a misunderstanding." Veronica's mind whirled with relief. She quickly composed herself. "Yes, a misunderstanding," she echoed, though her heart pounded. Reyes studied them both, suspicion evident. He didn't press the issue. "We received a tip about a possible altercation here. Miss Hale, are you sure you're fine?" Veronica nodded, her voice barely steady. "I'm fine." The detective nodded, gesturing for the officers to back off. Graham glared at Veronica, then stalked to his car. Before climbing inside, he turned back, voice laced with menace. "We'll finish this conversation later." As soon as his taillights faded, Reyes approached Veronica. "I need that flash drive," he said softly. "You're in way over your head. If you cooperate, there might be a deal for you." She met his gaze, fear and desperation swirling in her eyes. For a moment she didn't answer, then she nodded slowly. "Let's talk," she whispered. Over the next 72 hours, a flurry of deals and confessions took place behind closed doors. Veronica, spooked by Graham's aggression and convinced the Dow would eventually discover the incriminating evidence, decided to turn over everything to Detective Reyes in exchange for a plea deal or immunity. She relinquished the flash drive, plus a backup link Stark had given her. In so doing, she provided enough corroboration to tie Graham Ashworth to multiple counts of money laundering, conspiracy, and fraud. The irony was that Stark himself never showed up again. Rumors swirled he'd fled the city to avoid retaliation. Others whispered he'd been taken care of, though no one had proof. Within days, the district attorney's office filed formal charges against Graham. A swarm of law enforcement officers descended on Ashworth Industries. Investigators seized computers, financial records, entire servers. The media had a field day. Helicopters buzzed overhead as cameras captured the sight of the once mighty millionaire being led away in handcuffs from his downtown penthouse. Patricia watched it live on television from her father's estate. She felt sick to her stomach, seeing the father of her unborn child in that position. Part of her, still connected to the memory of who he once was, couldn't help feeling sorrow, but another part felt vindication. This was the natural outcome of his callous choices, his greed, and his disregard for anyone's well-being but his own. A swirl of flashbulbs, outraged shouts, and dozens of reporters crowded the courthouse steps. It had been exactly 3 weeks since the night at the Bradford when Graham allowed his mistress to publicly pour wine over his pregnant wife. Now, the dashing millionaire found himself in a dark navy suit, flanked by his defense attorneys, heading into the grand marble courthouse to stand trial. The charges ranged from financial crimes to intimidation and conspiracy. Judge Bateman sat in the gallery, not as the presiding judge, but as a spectator, supporting his daughter. Patricia was also there, her pregnancy more pronounced, her face drawn with anxiety. She was due in 2 months, and the stress of testifying loomed over her, though for now she was spared the ordeal. On the other side, Veronica Hale walked into court separately, escorted by law enforcement. She was a key witness for the prosecution, exchanging her cooperation for legal leniency. When the bailiff called the court to order, all eyes turned to the front. Seated beside his legal team, Graham Ashworth maintained an air of barely concealed fury. This was the day of reckoning, a spectacle for all of Aspen Falls. The trial was expected to last weeks, but even from the opening statements, it was clear how devastating the evidence was. The prosecution painted a portrait of a man who, behind his veneer of wealth and glamour, orchestrated a sprawling scheme to hide illicit funds, bribed officials, and threatened anyone who stood in his path. The highlight of the day came when the prosecutor displayed bank transfers that matched the data on Veronica's flash drive. Though Graham's attorneys objected, claiming the chain of custody was questionable, the judge allowed it as preliminary evidence. Outside the courthouse, throngs of citizens and journalists clamored. Commentators on national news channels dissected every piece of testimony. The story of Graham's downfall, especially after his callous treatment of his pregnant wife, captivated the public imagination. The once powerful figure had transformed into a cautionary tale overnight. Patricia, though not yet called to the stand, felt an internal tremor. She wondered if this was truly the end of her marriage or just the beginning of a different nightmare. She had to consider how to raise a child in the aftermath of this national scandal. Could she, or the child, ever truly escape the shadow of Graham Ashworth's disgrace? 2 days into the trial, a surprise witness emerged. Bernard Elwell, Graham's CFO, had struck a deal with the Dow. He testified about memos, instructions from Graham to funnel money through shell corporations, and covert shipments disguised as legitimate merchandise. The damning evidence piled high. Graham's legal team attempted to discredit Elwell, painting him as a desperate man saving his own skin, but the chain of emails and documents was too robust. Additionally, Detective Rise took the stand, describing the months-long investigation, culminating in the tip-off that led him to the train yard. The defense tried to poke holes in the detective's methods, yet Reyes had an impeccable record. More damaging still was a partial audio recording, albeit muffled, that revealed Veronica and Stark discussing hush money to bury the illegal shipments and accounts. It strongly implicated Graham as the orchestrator. Meanwhile, Veronica made a highly anticipated appearance. Dressed modestly, with subdued makeup, she portrayed herself as someone manipulated by Graham. Under direct examination by the prosecutor, she recounted the humiliating dinner at the Bradford. Though the main charges were financial crimes, the prosecutor sought to illustrate Graham's character and intimidation tactics. "What did you feel that night when you poured wine on Miss S. Ashworth?" the prosecutor asked. Veronica lowered her gaze, feigning regret. "I felt confused, pressured." Graham. He was laughing, egging me on in his own way. "I never intended to harm Patricia physically, but I was desperate for Graham's affection, for his favor." The defense objected, calling it irrelevant, but the judge allowed the testimony to stand for context. The public devoured this sensational confession. The trial was about more than money. It was about the moral downfall of a powerful figure. On the fourth day, Patricia Ashworth was called to the stand. Her father hovered close in the front row, prepared to intervene if she showed signs of distress. Her attorney had advised her on how to handle cross-examination, but still she was terrified. She felt the baby shift inside her, as if sensing her nerves. Under direct questioning, the prosecutor asked softly, "Miss S. Ashworth, can you describe your marital relationship with Mr. Ashworth in the months leading up to his arrest?" Patricia took a breath, tears threatening. "He was distant. He took phone calls at odd hours, left the house abruptly. He received packages at midnight and told me not to open them. When I asked about finances, he became angry. He once implied that I should be grateful for the lifestyle he provided, and that I shouldn't ask questions." The prosecutor nodded, stepping closer. "Did you ever feel threatened by him?" Patricia's gaze flickered to Graham, who stared at her with an unreadable expression. "I felt unsafe, especially after the dinner at the Bradford. He laughed while his mistress humiliated me. He never apologized. Then I started getting threatening phone calls. I believe they were connected to his activities." The defense pounced on cross-examination, suggesting Patricia was simply a scorned wife seeking revenge. They tried to paint her as emotional, unreliable. But Patricia, guided by her father's counsel, held firm. She stuck to factual incidents, dates, and specifics. Her poise impressed many in the courtroom, and the jury seemed sympathetic. Graham watched her intently, a storm brewing in his eyes. Patricia's measured testimony, combined with the avalanche of financial evidence, deepened the hole he was already in. The trial stretched on for 3 tense weeks, capturing national attention. Finally, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty on multiple counts, including conspiracy to commit money laundering, fraud, and intimidation. Sentencing would follow, but Graham Ashworth, once the toast of Aspen Falls society, had been judged by a jury of his peers. Patricia, sitting beside her father, quietly wept an emotional release after the stress of the trial and the looming prospect of raising her child amidst scandal. Judge Bateman laid a hand on her shoulder, offering silent support. Veronica Hale, indicted as a conspirator, had negotiated a deal that would require her to serve community service and pay heavy fines, but she avoided jail time in exchange for cooperating. She left the courthouse with cameras flashing, her social ambitions in tatters. As Graham was escorted out of the courtroom in cuffs, he glanced back at Patricia, and for a moment his mask of arrogance cracked. One might have seen regret flash across his face. Perhaps for the child he would not see grow up. Perhaps for the betrayal he inflicted, or for the life of wealth and freedom he would soon lose. Or maybe it was only anger that his carefully constructed empire had collapsed. Regardless, he said nothing, and the doors closed behind him. A month later, Patricia Ashworth gave birth to a healthy baby boy, Samuel Graham Ashworth, named partly in honor of her father, yet carrying the shadow of his father's legacy. Patricia devoted herself to motherhood, determined to provide a stable environment filled with love and integrity, despite the publicity swirling around their name. She and her father set up a trust fund to ensure the child's future, independent of Graham's tarnished fortune. Veronica Hale vanished from Aspen Falls' social scene for a while, rumor stating she had fled to Europe to escape the shame. There were murmurs she might re-emerge with a new identity, or try to claw her way back into the limelight. But for the time being, her reputation as the mistress who poured wine on a pregnant wife, embroiled in a criminal empire, was too toxic to overcome. Detective Julian Reyes received a commendation for his perseverance in investigating the Ashworth case. He went on to tackle other high-profile cases, forever shaped by the lesson that behind wealth and glamour, darkness can lurk. And so the story of Graham Ashworth, laughing as his mistress poured wine over his pregnant wife, only to face trial 3 weeks later, became a modern parable in Aspen Falls. It underscored how quickly fortunes can change, how betrayal can ignite unstoppable consequences, and how, in the pursuit of money, morals and decency can be lost. But it also revealed that justice, though often delayed, can find its way through even the murkiest labyrinth of lies. The shocking journey of Graham Ashworth's downfall began with a single moment of callous laughter and culminated in a courtroom where the power he once wielded meant nothing. We witnessed the unmasking of hidden crimes, the heartbreak of a betrayed wife struggling to protect her unborn child, and the desperate schemes of a mistress driven by ambition. In the end, justice claimed its due. Graham, stripped of his illusions, found himself behind bars, leaving Patricia and their newborn son to rebuild a life free of his corruption. This story serves as a cautionary reminder of how arrogance, greed, and betrayal can unravel even the most charmed life. If you found this real-life drama novel gripping, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned for more riveting tales that prove truth can be stranger than fiction.